Hey everyone, this is Axel from Get Speaking English. Thanks so much for coming out today, or if you're watching afterwards on YouTube. Um, right, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Axel Tierns from Get Speaking English, and today we're going to be checking out some questions about education for the B2 first, C1 advanced exams. Um, so just grab a coffee. This will be interactive, so if you're in the chat, feel free to throw your ideas. And what we'll do is I will add them to my notes. Afterwards, I will compile everything into a document so we can share everything along with the video on YouTube and Discord afterwards. So feel free to jump in and say hi as we go along. And yeah, help us generate some useful vocabulary and examples for our lesson today. All right, so as I mentioned, right now we are talking about education, and today, most specifically, we are going to be talking about part two. So, part two of the speaking paper, B2 first, C1 advanced. So, we're going to be discussing that today. And just an FYI, as I mentioned, this lesson is aimed for students who are preparing for B2 first or the C1 advanced Cambridge exams. However, a lot of this vocabulary, a lot of these phrases will also be really helpful if you are preparing for IELTS exam, for example, general English exam, or if you also just want to get speaking at an upper intermediate to an advanced level of English. So it's all going to be really useful for you in those respects. All right, perfect. And just a really quick overview about what we're going to do today. So, first of all, we're going to do a bit of a warm up. We're going to talk about maybe some topics that might come up when we're talking about education. We'll brainstorm some ideas for talking about those topics. Then we're going to look at a part two style task that you might see on the speaking paper. We're going to brainstorm some language for the pictures, how to talk about the questions, and today we're going to be focusing on learning some speculative language because we want to be speculating during this part of the exam. So we're going to be doing that today. And then, as usual, I will share the notes on Discord. Also, a copy of this video is going to go up online on YouTube, so you can review it afterwards. Take your notes, do everything you need to study, and hopefully, it will be a valuable resource for you. So, again, like I said, feel free to throw out your ideas, and so we can generate lots of examples and great vocabulary for discussing these topics today. All right, perfect. So, just as a warm up, let's talk about some common school subjects that you might learn about. Um, so here I have some ideas, and I hope you can't hear my cat is meowing in the background. That's why I was late. I was late for cat problems. So I hope he's not that distracting. But here are some common school subjects that you might look at. So let's brainstorm. What are some things that you might learn under each subject? Okay, so we have English or language arts. So obviously, what you would study when studying your native language. Science, mathematics, social studies, foreign language, physical education, and the arts. And again, like I said, feel free to throw out some ideas so we can get some ideas going. So I'm going to give you one moment to think about this question. And while I go and just deal with the cat for a quick second. All right, I'm back. He's still gonna bother me, but that's okay. So let's think of some subtopics that might come up underneath these topics. So language arts, for example, you might learn how to write essays, for example. Maybe analyze literature, for example. You may learn, you know, about grammar, those sort of things, writing, those sort of things. Also, obviously, maybe giving oral presentations. So those might be some things that will come up. Um, Maybe under science, we might have sort of maybe a couple really common topics. Biology, for example, so study of nature and organisms, those sort of things. Physics, maybe. Um, Maybe also just about like the Earth or the natural world, like for example, natural history of the Earth. Underneath here also, it's really common to, because there's a lot of math that's also discussed when we are talking about science, right? So maybe equations or, formulae. So those might come up when we're talking about science. And again, feel free to throw in your ideas. Um, of course, also, right, mathematics. Again, like equations and formulas. Um, but also, numbers, arithmetic, for example, or algebra, right? It's a little bit more complex. Geometry, maybe, shapes and angles and spaces of calculating the area of objects and things like that. Maybe also statistics, right? That might come up as well, and which is also really important when we, move on, maybe studying economics and things like that. Lots of statistics in business, for example. Maybe social studies, for example, studying history. Um, Again, feel free to throw out some ideas. Also, let me know if you could hear my cat. Because if he's really loud, I will put him outside. But I'm hoping he's not too bad. Right, so history, maybe economics, right? Social studies, typically like the study of society and people, right? Government, right? That might come up. How governments work, for example. Uh, or political science, for example. So about, politicians, policy, things like that. Maybe also about, uh, economics, right? How economies function, right? So those might come up as well. So some great ideas. Maybe also um, physical education. So, for example, uh, you know, physical activity, fitness, right? Maybe how to like take care of your body, health, right? So health and wellness. Um, also just about sports, right? Sports, maybe teamwork might be something that would come up, right? So yeah, so lots of great things. What else did I miss? I was so distracted with the cat. Under arts, arts as well. It's a good one. So not just to be confused with visual arts, although that does come under this category. So visual arts, such as, painting, photography, drawing. But when we think about arts in English, we also think of theater, for example, or drama. So those might come up. Um, oh, you're welcome. Yeah, so theater might come up, right? Um, arts as well. Dance, maybe. That's a form of expression, right? So lots of great little subtopics that we might uh, that you might learn under each of these topics, right? So, all right. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on part two of the B2 first and the C1 exam. So, some people call this the long turn. It's kind of a monologue. It's a bit of a speech here. All right. So, if you're unaware, just a really quick overview. When we do the B2 first, we do the C1 advanced, you're going to take the exam with a partner, okay? So part of the exam you'll be interacting with your partner, and then other parts of the exam you won't. So with this part, there is no interaction with your partner. Your partner will talk about your activity, and we'll talk about the activity in a second. But here, it's really a monologue, and a monologue is where we talk at length about a topic by ourselves for a period of time. Well, talk at length, right? So here we're going to be talking for a minute. So what happens during this part is you're going to get a piece of paper. On the B2 first, you're going to get 2 photos. On the C1 advanced, you're going to get 3 photos. And you can see that my example here is going to be about a C1 style speaking activity. And for this here, you have to compare and contrast the photos. And you're going to answer a question on the B2 first exam or 2 questions on the C1 advanced exam. And you're going to have 1 minute to do all of this, okay? So you're going to get your photos, you're going to do the activity, you're going to speak for 1 minute, and then afterwards your partner is also going to be asked a question about your photos, okay? And then after they do this activity, you will also respond to a question about their photos, okay? So today we are going to be checking out these photos here. Okay, so the examiner will give you the photos, and there's not a lot of time here. You don't have a lot of time to look at the photos. And they basically summarize what's the information on the sheet. So here, for example, today we're going to look at some photos of students doing different activities. Okay, we're going to compare 2 of the photos, so 2 out of the 3. And for this, we're going to say, how can students benefit from doing these activities, and how helpful might the activities be in preparing them for their future lives? Okay, so they'll say that. You'll have, a couple seconds to look at the photos there. While they are talking, you get no additional information. And once they finish summarizing the information on that page, they're going to say, all right. And then that's your cue to begin speaking, okay? There's no additional cue. They're not going to be like, you can start speaking now. You wait for them to tell you all right, and then you start talking about the photos, okay? So, all right. So today we're going to be looking at these 3, right? So, and let's enable these really quickly. So there's picture 2, picture 3, just to make it a little bit easier. So obviously we could see a girl studying. Looks like she's in a library. We have somebody who's giving a presentation. And we also look like Looks like we have a couple kids who are in a laboratory or something like that. All right. So so the idea here is to compare and contrast the photos, okay? So we're going to want to talk a bit about what's happening in the photos, right? But we're going to want to compare and contrast them as we go. So that's going to make this activity interesting. So let's talk really quickly just about these photos. So let's talk about this one. We're going to focus on this one. And we're going to focus on this one today. So, and again, feel free to throw out your ideas, but let's just generate some vocabulary for describing the photos, okay? So, because that's always going to be the key. You're always going to want to start with, saying what's happening so we know what photos you're talking about. So, for example, we have the presentation. Obviously, it looks like we have maybe, a young student, a young woman. Looks like she's giving a presentation. There looks like there's a crowd of people, right? And those people also look like they're maybe young, right? Maybe they're students. We could talk about where she is. If I were to guess, I would say that maybe she's at a library. I'm going to guess that it's some sort of public place because it looks like there are people in the background, right? So maybe she's like in a library. But she could also maybe be, I don't know, in part of the school, for example, because it looks like she could maybe be a high school student, right? Or maybe she's a university student. It's hard to tell. You're never going to know exactly what's going on, and that's the point of these photos, right? They want you to speculate, hypothesize, guess about what's going on. So really important. Obviously, yeah, so she has some microphones, and it looks like she's giving some sort of presentation on some sort of maybe a projector or a whiteboard, something like that. Yeah, so she's giving a presentation, or maybe she's giving a speech. So lots of things that we could say about this photo. And let's talk about this one as well, right? And again, feel free to throw out your ideas about what you see as well. But it looks like we have some students in a lab, right? In a laboratory. So, and it looks like they're actually pretty young. I would guess that they're a bit younger than the other girl. So, young children, maybe. Maybe they're in middle school. Possibly. Middle school, elementary school. And it looks like they're in some sort of science lab, right? Or there looks like maybe they're doing something with robotics, right? Or maybe they're doing something with engineering. I don't know. Whatever they're doing looks like it's a bit interesting, right? Obviously, they have there's some different machinery, right? Of some machines or lab equipment. I mean, we can see this funny. I'm not entirely sure what this is, right? But that seems like they're doing something with that. Obviously, they have a computer, they have a laptop, right? And it looks like maybe they're working on some sort of group project together, right? So, yeah, and of course, right, whenever we have a group project, that sort of activity requires a lot of teamwork, right? So yeah, so it looks like maybe they're doing some sort of project together. that requires them to work together. Right. So lots of great things that we can say about this uh, photograph as well, right? So now that we have some ideas about how to just talk about the photos, let's get into talking about these questions, right? So I mentioned on the B2 first exam, you're going to respond to one question. So you'll only have two photos. You will talk about those two photos. You will answer one question. On the C1 Advanced, you get three. You have to talk about only two photos, but then you have to answer two questions and do all of that within that 1 minute. So here, that first question, we have how can students benefit from doing these different activities? And again, we're going to consider this question for the one photo that we picked and then for the other photo that we picked. So again, going back to that presentation, how can we answer this question thinking about the presentation, right? It's like, well, obviously, this is an activity that teaches public speaking skills, maybe. Right? So that's really important. A lot of people get maybe what we call stage fright, which is like that fear of speaking in public, or of being, in front of people. Yeah, and it might teach them to get over a fear of speaking in public, which I think is something that a lot of us struggle with, right? It's hard to speak in front of a crowd of people. So yeah, so that might teach that kind of skill. Along those lines, we might say that maybe it helps people gain confidence. So great collocation there to gain confidence. So you feel a bit better. You feel more confident in yourself. And there, that's that, that adjective. Yeah. So, also a great opportunity to improve your communication skills, right? Right? Because if you're speaking in public, you have to think really carefully about what you're saying, organize your notes, make sure that you are communicating in an effective, clear manner, right? So, and all of that helps you hone those skills, right? When we talk about honing a skill, it means to kind of make it better, like to perfect something, right? I really hope my cat's not bothering you guys. Alright, so if anyone else has any ideas about what we could say for this, just let me know. I'll add it to our list here. But now let's think about this question in terms of the lab. Which I can't spell. There we go. Laboratory. Right. So teaching, so working in this lab, we already mentioned that it's going to teach us teamwork, right? Obviously they're working together, right? So, so that's really important, right? How to work in a team. Maybe it teaches problem-solving skills because it looks like they are trying to figure something out, right? And if we try to figure something out, that's kind of a fancy phrasal verb for, to solve a problem, right? Or decide what you're going to do, right? So that's really important. Um, so if you like hone a skill, it means that you are improving that skill. Um, so we can't really use that word like in place of the word improve, right? I mean, sometimes to hone a skill, to improve a skill. Here it would work. But it really means to, like, really perfect that skill, uh, get yourself really accurate, right? So, and become really excellent in what you're doing. So, becoming really precise, really good. So, we might say that, yeah, to hone a skill. So, that's kind of a collocation that you might see, to hone a skill. Um, Going back to the lab, let's see. It also looks like they're just creating something, right? Maybe how to create or how to engineer something. So usually we see the word engineer, like an engineer being used as a noun, right? Here I'm actually using it as a verb, so that's really interesting. So we can say to engineer something, as in to maybe creating something that requires engineering um, to make something work, right? Um, it also, right, obviously, maybe it's teaching them how to build things, right? Or how to construct things. I mean, there are so many things, so many skills that are potentially being learned here, right? Maybe computer skills. I don't know, lots of different things. Maybe coding. I don't know. Maybe math. Ugh. Yeah, tons of skills that maybe this project is teaching, right? Um, and obviously, all of this is going to be really beneficial, right? So let's talk about the next question. And again, like considering these two pictures, right? So, how helpful might the activities be in preparing them for their future lives, right? I wish my cat would just like come in here and sleep. Okay. So again, so thinking about the two pictures, right? So we have presentations, the presentation. So how might the activities, or sorry, how helpful might the activities be in preparing them for their future lives, right? So for me, I guess a no-brainer could be that it would be helpful for a career in public speaking, for example, right? So, if they wanted to do that, right? Um, and maybe not necessarily like, um, some people obviously travel around the world, give really big presentations and things like that. But public speaking is also really important, even if you're just doing office presentations or business meetings or something like that, right? So maybe good for doing presentations in an office, for example, or business presentations. If you're in the business of selling things or marketing things, there are lots of opportunities there to deliver presentations and all of, this kind of thing could be, could really help you uh, hone those skills. Right. Sales pitches, right? May be really good, right? Or marketing pitches. And a pitch is basically, it's kind of like an idea that you would give to, your potential customer. You try to convince them that your idea is really good. So your pitch is that sort of that concept, the thing they should do. Um, it might also just be really good for delivering reports as well, right? So, for example, maybe if you just did some sort of a big project, um, it's common sometimes to be selected to then report about what happened with that project for your team or for the company, give status reports, things like that. So, obviously, this kind of activity might be really good for helping people gain confidence in doing that kind of activity, right? Um, so if anybody else has any ideas, feel free to throw them out. Um, and let's think about, again, the same question with the lab, right? So obviously, this kind of activity might be really good for a career in STEM, right? Right? So something that has to do with maths or engineering, sciences, something like that. Potentially anything that requires a lot of teamwork, right? Which I would say is probably the majority of jobs, right? It's so common that you have to work with other people, whether it's just your teammates or maybe with customers or maybe clients, right? So it's really important. Uh, so it's really useful for all of those things, right? Uh, any job that requires maybe negotiation and cooperation, right? Because the moment that you're working on a team, you are always um, having to negotiate, compromise, and try to come to an agreement with other people, right? So maybe it's going to be really good for that. Um, Also, obviously, maybe learning skills. Well, obviously, they're dealing with robotics, right? So, learning skills about robotics, right? And engineering. So, maybe these kind of skills will be really valuable in the future for that reason. Um, and I'm going to guess too that there's probably some sort of component of coding or something in here as well, right? Maybe it teaches coding or programming, which would be valuable in a career uh, in that field. So lots of, potential, uh, lots of great things that these activities can teach students that they will then be able to use later on in the future, right? So really great. So so now we have like lots of language for talking about just like the individual photos by themselves. So now we just have to bring everything together, right? So as I mentioned earlier, right, we always want to compare and contrast the two photos, right? But then also answer the questions. And we could also answer the questions while comparing and contrasting at the same time, right? So obviously, we'll want to use comparative language, right? So we're going to want to study that kind of language when we're preparing for this activity, right? And we could use phrases like, or not phrases, words like while and whereas, right? To join together two contrasting ideas in a single sentence. So, for example, an idea. So, giving presentations would be really useful for a career in business, right? While working in a lab would be a lot better for a job in STEM. So there we have two different sort of ideas. We've put them all together into one sentence using while. And it's in the same way we could also use whereas. It doesn't really change the meaning of the phrase at all. But yeah, we could use this to sort of put two ideas together in a single sentence. And we could also use phrases such as, on the other hand, or however. But these usually work a little bit differently. These are more like when you have two sentences that have contrasting ideas. So, for example, I'll put an example here. So we could say to start, so on one hand, studying alone. Oh, here I'm talking about this photo here. So on one hand, studying alone shows that you are able to learn on your own and be self-disciplined. So if you have good self-discipline, you are able to keep yourself on task, do the tasks that you need to do without having other people motivate you. So you have good control. So on one hand, da-da-da-da-da, new sentence. On the other hand, it's important for people to know how to work together as a team, right? So those are two very valuable different things, right? On one hand, it's really good to be self-disciplined, right? Show that you're able to learn on your own. However, on the other hand, it's really important that people know how to work together as a team, right? So typically when we use phrases like on the other hand or however, it starts a new sentence, right? So here's another example. So for example, public speaking will be useful if you work in business, right? End of the sentence. However, comma, robotics will be more useful for an engineering job. So again, we have it two separate sentences here, and we're using however to sort of join those ideas together. So that's sort of one really easy way for making making our comparisons using these kinds of phrases or words. And then also, obviously, we're going to want to use lots of comparative and superlative adjectives, right? So, for example, so here, for example, I think working with robots would be more interesting and better at preparing students to work in an engineering field than giving presentations, maybe, since I didn't add the other comparison. So here you can see, right, more interesting, so more with adjectives that have multiple syllables, right? And better is sort of an exception. An irregular one, I should say, not an exception, an irregular one. Here's another example. So doing presentations is more useful. Again, multiple syllables. If you want a career in public speaking. And another final example here, right? I definitely think that teaching teamwork is the most valuable skill to learn. And here we have a superlative. So not just most valuable, but the most valuable skill to learn. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we're using lots of these when we are doing this activity. So we can show that we can compare and contrast the two photos and compare and contrast while answering the questions as well. All right. So I said today that we were going to talk about speculative language. What does this mean? Speculative language. So another little key component, especially on the C1 advance, is to use speculative language. And when we are speculating, we make hypotheses. We try to guess what is happening, right? Because in these pictures, we never know 100% for sure what is going on. We're always guessing, right? So there's lots of little phrases, keywords, things that we might use for doing this kind of activity. And I'm actually going to leave it over to you guys for a second, because I have this example here based on these two photos. So I want you guys to give it a quick read, and I want you guys to try to identify the language I've used for speculating. Um, and we'll come back in a minute and we'll go through, pick out the ideas or the examples, and see what we have here. All right. Mm-mm. All right. So, sorry about that. There we go. All right. So let's talk about some of the language in here. So I've gone through, I've highlighted a few things. So, all right. So in one photo, there is a girl who seems to be giving some sort of presentation. So we might use, verbs like seems, as in, something appears like something or it looks like something. Yeah, so a girl who seems to be giving some sort of presentation. While in another photo, we can see a group of teenagers working together in some kind of lab. So it looks like they are all working with robots and doing a type of group activity. I suppose that a student would benefit from giving presentations because it would improve their communication skills. On the other hand, robotics would teach children about math and computers and physics. They could use these skills if they wanted to pursue a career in STEM, for example. In terms of how useful these activities might be for their futures, I guess public speaking would be really helpful if you wanted to work in business and needed to do a lot of presentations or sales pitches in your company. Robotics, however, would be a lot more helpful for a career in engineering or something like that. So these kinds of skills are in demand, so the activity would be really useful for them. All right. So lots of great verbs in here, right? So seems, right? Seems, or it looks like. And we always need to remember that S here, right? So it looks like. And we notice here too that these are always, like, at least here it looks like. We could also say it seems like, for example. New clause, right? So new independent clause. So for example, I suppose that a student would benefit from giving presentations because oh, I'm bad. Sorry. Different ones. Sorry, it looks like they are working with robots. There we go. So it looks like they are working with robots, right? Also some great alternatives to saying I think. So we might say I think a lot, but we have a couple other options in English as well. So we can see here, I suppose that, or I guess that, right? So I suppose that, and again, new clause, or I guess that. And another one that I didn't put in here, I imagine that, we might also say. So again, some great phrases. So we don't have to say I think all the time, but these are also great as well. So yeah, so I suppose that a student would benefit from giving presentations because XYZ, right? You also notice that there's a lot of modal verbs in here. So we have lots of, woulds and coulds and woulds. So, and not just any model, like models. I mean, yeah, you could say models like can and will, but we sound a lot more uncertain if we use like those past modal verbs. So would, could, might. May is also a great one to talk about possibility, but these ones are definitely great ones to use. And you can also see here too that I've used some second conditional phrases, right? So, these skills could be helpful if they wanted. So past. So if they wanted to pursue a career in STEM, for example, right? And here as well, right? I guess public speaking would be helpful if you wanted to work in business, right? So that also indicates that we're unsure, right? And those are great phrases to use in this kind of activity as well. Also some great sort of language to talk about things when we don't know exactly what we're talking about. So phrases like, there's some sort of, or some sort of singular noun, right? So there's like some sort of lab or some sort of activity. We could also say some type of, or some sort of, some kind of. So those are great as well. Um, and here also, I've also used, a type of activity. So again, just another little variation on this. So a type of group activity. And we could use this kind of language if we kind of vaguely know what something's about, but we don't know exactly what it is. So we know what the subject's related to, but we don't know enough about it to really talk about it in a precise way. Um, and this down here as well too. Another great expression for expressing yourself in an inexact way, right? So phrases like or something like that or something along those lines. Like those are great little phrases that we could use when we're really unsure about what it is that we see and what it is that we want to say. So lots those are really great. Yeah, so lots of really great ones. Um, yeah. So any kind of language like that is going to be really, really useful when we're doing this activity. And you see, it's not that complicated, right? Probably the hardest thing is dealing with the time because we do only have 1 minute to get through the whole thing. But I think if you keep comparing and contrasting the entire time, it's gonna be really good. And also another little hint as another little tip as well, because it could be that you finish doing the task before the minute is up, right? And if that happens, just keep comparing and contrasting the photos until the examiner tells you to stop, right? So we never want to um so in part one, right, we don't want to say too much. But on this part of the activity, we want to keep talking until the examiner tells us to stop. So just keep comparing, contrasting, even after you've, answered the two questions and talked about the two photos. Just keep going until the examiner tells you to stop. And you should be good to go. So, fun activity. Really great. All right. So, just about wrapping up here. So I just wanted to thank everyone so much for coming out today and also for watching this video afterwards on YouTube. I hope that it was helpful to you. As usual, I will go ahead and I will compile these notes in a document so you can download these as well and review the material whatever you'd like. Of course, for more opportunities to get speaking English with me, I have lots going on social media. So we have Telegram, lots of Telegram groups. We have Instagram as well, with lots of fancy, not fancy, but useful posts. Also, I have a general English I have several general English groups as well where you can go and find a speaking prompt so you can practice your speaking every single day, and that's a great activity as well. I'm also doing a number of free events this month, and actually it's been pretty quiet, so if you want to come out and get a lot of time reading and speaking, this is the month to do it. So we have uh, another live stream coming up next week. I'm going to talk about part 3 of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. And then I also do a reading vocabulary/discussion class on Saturdays right now. So we have one coming up on the 20th. So this Saturday, it's going to be an easier article. So better for those who are around an intermediate B1, B2 level. And then on May 27th, it's going to be a harder one. So the article and the question will be a little bit difficult. But they're a lot of fun, so feel free to come out and check them out. They're all on Zoom. So, and like I said, it's been pretty quiet right now because I think because it's summer and people are out on Saturdays. So it's a perfect opportunity if you want lots of time to talk and discuss and have some time discussing with me these questions, or these articles, rather. All right. Anyways, thank you so much, everyone, again, for coming out. And I will see you next week. All right. Bye, guys.